Robservations with Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your evangelist of the imagination, and, of course, the nonsensical, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am once again Robcasting at you, you Imagination Connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations, episode number 676, post-Oscars 2021 show. I have a lot of thoughts about the Oscars and about basically where we are as far as the film business is concerned. I keep having this conversation with various friends of mine, variations on a theme, different aspects of this all, but I was thinking about movies, as I usually do. As you've heard my mom tell you, I was thinking about movies even as a little kid. But what sort of fascinates me now is, where do movies sit amidst our pop culture? Do they hold the same place they held 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago? Or are they different? As our culture has been progressing, I think over the last 10 years, I think there's been an acceleration of this process. And I think a lot of it has to do with social media and that kind of thing. The old gods have sort of been demythologized. And there is I think when it comes to people in general, there's a deep cynicism toward just toward other people in general. A lack of respect, maybe, toward people. And it is almost a snarky, I don't know, self-awareness that permeates a lot of the conversation that we have. And one of the things about Hollywood that I always loved was it was a place where we went to dream. Our society, that's what movies were to me. They were dreams. They were collective dreams that they were larger than life, and we could share them together. And one of the things I loved about Hollywood, when I think about, the movies that I love that really affected me when I was a kid, everything from, I remember not wanting to go see Gandhi, thinking it was going to be a chore to sit through. But as somebody who loves stories, I was immediately swept up and engrossed with the epic historical tale of Mahatma Gandhi and his where he came from. And of course, Ben Kingsley won the Oscar for playing Gandhi, and the filmmaking was masterful. And I was thinking, even for this historical epic, in a way, there was a dreamlike quality to it. And all of the great films, I mean, think about it. Pick your favorite movies. And I know nowadays, you Imagination Connoisseurs, a lot of the people that follow this channel will tend to focus on more Imagination Connoisseur bill of fare, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, things like that. My favorite movies are not necessarily genre films. I like a lot of genre films, but the movies that resonate with me are not usually genre movies. Like, I love the Godfather. Godfather 1 and 2 are two of my favorite films of all time. Coppola's also Apocalypse Now. I love movies like All About Eve or All That Jazz. Two alls in the title, but very different films. A lot of these movies have a larger-than-life quality to them. Sure, they're set in certain milieus, but the stories are mythic. So you might have, like, even Gandhi, that is the tale of a man who actually lived. It feels mythic. The Last Emperor, Bertolucci's The Last Emperor. I remember being taken away, just really captivated by The Last Emperor, the saga of Puyi. I loved it, but there was a mythic quality to it. Even though you're watching a movie about something that actually happened, a person that really lived, it felt larger than that. And I think one of the things about movies, at least Hollywood of yore, was the great Hollywood films are, in fact, mythic. All About Eve. It's really a movie about the New York theater industry. But really, it's also about one of the great femme fatales, about ambition. It's about evil. And it takes on a mythic quality, even though it's set in some place that could feel fairly mundane if you weren't necessarily interested in theater or the inner workings of actors and directors and producers. But the movie felt mythic. And I think one of the reasons we all fell in love with movies is that mythic nature. I mean, you could watch something like Lawrence Kasdan's Body Heat, Kathleen Turner and William Hurt, and from the early 80s, great John Barry score, and it was a noirish tale. And even though it was a small tale, really, it still felt bigger, felt mythic. Back to the Future, perfect screenplay, an entertainment only Hollywood could give you. It is mythic. It's science fiction. It's comedic. It's multiple genres rolled into one, and that's why we love it. And the story doesn't miss a beat. And these are things that it seemed that only Hollywood could do. And I wonder now. Of course, we have the studios were making these movies. These were what the studios churned out. Now, the role of the studio is to churn out these ever more grandiose entertainments because they're owned by larger and larger conglomerates. And the idea is now we have to tell a story that's based on a previous IP, they call it, of some sort. Normally, Hollywood would adapt a book. You'd have a best-selling book, you would adapt it. Nowadays, is that book good enough? I would maintain that even now, Hollywood can still do that. I think about David Fincher's Gone Girl. I read Gillian Flynn's book. I read it almost in two sittings, maybe. One day. Devoured that book. Loved it. Movie version, David Fincher's film version, terrific adaptation of the book. That movie has that mythic Hollywood quality. It's not real life. Not at all. And it feels mythic. You cut to this year's Academy Awards and the movies that were up for Academy Awards. And this has been going on for a while. It felt like more of an independent spirit awards at the Academy Awards anyway. But the movies that we're seeing are not bad films. They're wonderful films. Minari, The Father, Nomadland, our Best Picture winner. And while they can be mythic on a personal level, they're more intimate and they're more like slices of real life that are imbued with a mythic quality to them, but I guess they don't feel like myths that were handed down from Mount Olympus. And I think one of the things that people are responding to, obviously, I'm not going to talk about, look, there's a reason why most of the people, let's face it, have not seen a lot of the movies that were up for Oscars this year because, one, we didn't have movie theaters, and two, people just didn't know about them. And I understand that. I mean, I would love the chance to see Nomadland in IMAX or Mank in IMAX. I know they were in some theaters, but for the most part, I think movies, especially because Hollywood is now, you're no longer chasing a couple of $100 million in box office. You're chasing $1 billion or $2 billion or $3 billion. That's the business that studios have chosen for themselves. And with the big studios choosing to do that, that's why we're getting more comic book movies, more IP, more sequels and theme park rides, rock'em sock'em robots based on a toy because Hasbro's making more movies now. Or whatever, Mattel is making more movies now. Which I understand, but we've lost something. The sort of mythic Hollywood-ness of movies. Movie stars. I mean, Frances McDormand, phenomenal actress. She's incredible. She won Best Actress and won for Best Picture because she's a producer on Nomadland. But as a star, I love Frances McDormand. She melts into the background. She makes me believe. She is peak verisimilitude, but that doesn't mean that she can't, say, be in one of her husband's films in a Coen Brothers movie and be glamorous because she can. But she might not be considered a traditional Hollywood beauty, but I think that's her strength. She can play any role. Can you imagine the movie Fargo without her? You can't. Why? Because she's that damn good. She's indelible. She's an amazing actress, an amazing performer. But is she mythic? Maybe she can be in Fargo, but certainly not in Nomadland. What's so great about that movie is she's absolutely believable as somebody real that you could go out and meet in the Midwest. You take off in your van and you might run into her. That's her strength. You believe that she's real. So when you see her in a film, peak verisimilitude, which I love. But the Hollywood-ness of all of it, the stories, I mean, right now, well, it's just something I've been thinking about. Are we going to get back to the mythic Hollywood-ness of our movies, or have we lost out on those? Now, I think streaming services, long form, has been giving us that. The Queen's Gambit, a lot of mythic stuff in there, just like Godless. Scott Frank knows what's up. But has all of that stuff moved over? The Old Guard with Charlize Theron, that felt like that old mythic Hollywood fantasy filmmaking. Like, would a studio, here's another thing, everyone's looking out for IP, but I've always said that the great thing about Hollywood is, you know, Hollywood used to be successful by setting trends, not following trends. And a lot of the IPs that are big now, whether it's Marvel, whether it's Star Wars, I mean, take your pick. Star Wars was once something no one had ever heard of. It was original to the movies. And if there is anyone making spec scripts anymore, where are the new IPs going to come from? Where are we going to be in 20 years if this kind of creativity, if we're losing our mythic ability to make something new people haven't seen? I mean, it's so interesting. You think about movies like RoboCop or Total Recall. I mean, they had those mythic Hollywood. Only Hollywood could make that. And then when you watch the remakes, they feel rote and by the numbers. Even though the director of the remake of RoboCop made the Elite Force films, which were pretty stunning. Happens a lot. They bring foreign directors to Hollywood to sort of make these new films, and we end up with these kinds of remakes that just feel even off as far as remakes go, because, as I said, the filmmakers weren't necessarily passionate about these projects. They were just getting hired. They were guns for hire, and who's not going to say yes to being called to Hollywood to make a movie? So anyway, I wanted to talk about where we are at. And one of the things I wanted to read, an article that I'm going to start with, there is a man named Richard Rushfield who puts out a newsletter that you have to subscribe to. And if you're interested in the business of filmmaking, I highly recommend it. I like the way Richard Rushfield writes. And so look it up. The Ankler, Giving Hollywood the Business. And he had an article today that he calls Train Wreck at the Train Station. That's because we know some of the Oscars was shot live at Union Station in Los Angeles, which, if I want to be deeply cynical about it, I could talk about it as a cynic, but what an interesting choice. Obviously, as far as Hollywood history goes, Union Station, I mean, my God, everything from, you name it. I mean, even Blade Runner was shot in Union Station. I was on the set of Trancers 2 when they were shooting that in Union Station. If there's an iconic location to shoot something at in Hollywood, it's Union Station. I mean, my God, just Google how many times Los Angeles' Union Station appeared in a film. A lot. So the fact that they chose to shoot there was, in my mind, iconic. So anyway, we're getting a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking about that, but I'm not going to get into that. But I'd like to start by reading this article, a couple articles about the state of the Oscars and what it says about where we're at in Hollywood today. So Richard Rushfield says, I'm not the sort of entertainment journalist to go around saying told you all the time, but damn if I hadn't earned a giant I told you so today, then I don't know when anyone ever has. Still think my idea to cancel the awards and throw a telethon to benefit COVID victims of the world was nuts? The best thing about last night's show is that we can now put to rest forever the annual conversation about how to save the Oscars. The ship has set sail, gone over the horizon, and put into dry dock in Madagascar. The question now isn't how to save this monster, it's how to put it down before it can do any more harm. The Oscars have become the birthday cake that has turned rancid. It's as if our own promotional campaign became self-aware and turned against us, Skynet-like. To put it another way, imagine if the Ford Motor Company had booked TV time for a national ad promoting its new model. Then just before it was about to go up, the marketing department unveiled the ads and they featured 90 seconds of Ford employees hitting themselves in the face with a block of wood. Would Ford say, well, we'll lose a fortune if we don't run these because the time is already paid for, or at least it'll raise awareness, or, but a lot of people really worked hard on these. Or they would say, no one who sees this ad will ever buy a Ford again. Burn every copy before you ruin us all. Okay, before we get into it, let's say a few nice things. The room was very beautiful. The wide shots when the speaker was speaking directly into the camera were very beautiful and gave a sense of shooting it like a film intent. While the films may have been dark and small, the winners by and large did amazing work, deserving of trophies in this year or any year. Agreed. After spending the very better part of $1 billion attempting to swallow up the entire awards sector in a year where its big foe, theatrical, was literally shut down, the service failed to take home any major award. You can bet Netflix didn't spend $1 billion for a Best Editing trophy. Even in this wild, corrupt sector, money apparently can't buy everything. Yet. I like the lamps. There is so much to be appalled by in this year's awards race, leading right up to the big night. It's hard to know where to begin. The whole proceedings were fueled by this magical elixir of self-absorption and self-importance mixed with incompetence. Or more potent potion to chase away audiences is hard to imagine. And not just chase them away from the Oscars, but to disgust them with Hollywood itself and all of its works, above and beyond the normal sea level of disgust with Hollywood. I thought I was going to begin this column with, quote, can't say they didn't try something new, but they really didn't try very much new, apart from the location and the order shuffling. They just tweaked the regular old stuff we've been complaining about for years in ways to make it worse. Where do we start with the basic competence issues? Setting it in a train station where there's a constant background noise that makes you feel like you're sitting in a train station. I mean, I caught hell about the sound quality of my podcast from listeners, and it sounded 1,000 times better than the Oscars show. The idea of the intimate gathering was betrayed by the flood of lighting from the giant windows in the first half, although it looked very elegant once the sun had set, and the shots of everyone frozen and distant at these altogether not cozy separate tables, stars sitting alone, drinkless, frozen with rictus grins, and nowhere to hide during the 3-hour-plus slog. From certain angles, it indeed looks cinematic, but the attempt to pass off this as a convivial little get-together of friends couldn't have been less convincing if the audience was made of waxwork. In retrospect, if you want intimate, is a train station really the best place for that? And also, why intimate? Has that ever been part of the awards racket formula? The decision to do away with any clips, montages, songs, jokes, or bits in favor of more speeches, and the return to the speeches about the nominees, no less, a mind-boggling decision, as that little innovation was universally proclaimed as one of the worst things to ever happen at the show when it was last briefly tried a few years back. Once we know that Glenn Close's spontaneous knowledge of rap history and impromptu twerk performance were rehearsed, as the producers kindly confirmed 15 seconds after the show ended, then what exactly was fun or charming about that moment? Apart, of course, from it being GIF fodder, which is about the limit of the Academy's understanding of what the children want. And if all you have to do is to give it to them to show the immemorial reel at triple speed. And then, of course, the final fatal miscalculation. They disrupt the entire flow and building of suspense of the night for a grand finale on an assumption that the results will go a certain way. Then the backup in the final moment of the night isn't even there. The scorn is raining down, but honestly, I can't even come up with a parallel of incompetence for that one. What about that whole thing that was promised in the build-up? That this was going to be about the magic of cinema and the movie-going experience, and they did that without barely a single peek at a movie. By having people give longer speeches? Did anyone in the entire night except Frances McDormand mention the title thing that is happening to the movie-going mention the little thing that is happening to the movie-going experience right now? Much less encourage, God forbid entice, people to go out and see movies? Or would that have hurt Netflix's feelings? Taking a step back, the show was a full, rich display of how removed Hollywood has become from the business it was hired to do, entertaining. and how, as a result, the film business teeters on the brink of irrelevance and insolvency. First, in the worst year the world has known in quite some time, a moment when a little entertainment would be a mission of mercy in itself, they decide to go ahead with a show in a year where there were no movies, in a contest between a handful of films almost no one has heard of, let alone seen. Then they do a show heavy on the lectures and finger wagging, one that barely even makes passing reference to the little plague the world is experiencing right about now. I counted 3 very, very brief nods. When people object to the current trend in award shows, it's countered with, well, that's sour grapes from someone upset that different sorts of people get awards now. Honestly, the one good thing here is the increasing diversity amongst the nominees and the winners. I don't really care who wins the big prize, and I have no objection to Nomadland. It's no doubt a better film than many, many others that have won over the years. My favorites never win and generally are not even nominated. Diversity doesn't have to be mean, grim, and dreary. It doesn't have to mean an awards party that feels like a funeral or an HR seminar. Marvel, to name one producer, showed that you can make a big, giant, popular movie with a black cast and overtly socially aware themes and still be a crowd-pleasing film. I hope there will be many more like it across the industry. But the Oscars have been so defensive, so self-absorbed, and so self-important, so afraid of any criticism that they've completely lost sight of what an award show is. Unfortunately for them, the audience still has a vote in this and will shortly find out their verdict. I've got a feeling there's not a lot of people of any political stripe looking to watch an award show as social duty. In 1989, after the infamous Alan Carr Snow White Oscars, Gregory Peck and 17 other members sent a letter the next morning to the Academy. It read in part, "The 61st Academy Awards show was an embarrassment to both the Academy and the entire motion picture industry. It is neither fitting nor acceptable that the best work in motion pictures be acknowledged in such a demeaning fashion. We urge the President and the governors of the Academy to ensure that future award presentations reflect the same standard of excellence as that set by the films and filmmakers they honor. This year, when ratings will be many orders of magnitude below that debacle, will any of the members speak up about the ditch this show is careening into?" Well, that's what Richard Rushfield of The Ankler asks. But I have a different take. And my take is, working in the movie business, I have a movie that I've edited and produced that's going on the festival circuit even now. It's playing in Miami. It's going to play at the Boca Raton Jewish Film Festival. It's going all up and down the East Coast over the next 6 months. It's even playing in a number of foreign countries. It took years to make this film. I only played a very small part. I was, of course, the editor, and I produced the film and worked hand in hand with the director, Gabe Bologna. But it represents the dreams of many different people. And it was worked on for a very, very long time. Movies are still magical. I've often said on this show that there's an alchemy to movies, like Rumpelstiltskin spinning straw into gold. And I feel that that magic is one of those things that, at least for me, makes life worth living. I like the movies. I like being transported. I like being taken away. And I would I'd read about and I'd watch the Oscars when I was a kid. The Oscars, too, were magical because I got to see the people that made the movies. I loved the most seeing people from behind the scenes. And it seems like the real problem with the Oscars is that over the years, things have been bled out. The mythic nature of the Oscars. And people can be as cynical as they want. Anyone who's cynical about non-inclusion, this year's Oscars was terrifically inclusive of all different kinds of people. And I think that even the Best Actor category, everyone seems to be angry that Anthony Hopkins, one of our great actors, who's lost an Academy Award 4 times previous, he did win one for Silence of the Lambs 29 years ago. But the fact that somebody would say, well, he's not deserving, because we now live in a culture where supreme disrespect, no one's careers are taken into consideration, or the tens of thousands of hours somebody puts into their craft, like Anthony Hopkins has. Somebody just flippantly calls it, well, it's the white male patriarchy one time triumphing again. I mean, ridiculous. Give the man a bit of respect. His performance was exemplary. All 5 actors were amazing performers. 2 of them were British theater actors that became film actors. And then we had one of our first Muslims, our first Muslim, Riz Ahmed, Chad Boseman, and of course Stephen Yen, a Korean, being nominated for Minari. This is an amazing thing. And the films themselves, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, based on an August Wilson play. By the way, strangely enough, while Ma Rainey's Black Bottom felt, in a way, sort of small, I thought it had a very mythic Hollywood quality about it. It's an incredible film with incredible performances. Viola Davis, my God, what a powerhouse she is. But that film is an amazing film. I thought that actually, I mean, yes, it was, a lot of it was set in one room, but it had that Hollywood mythic quality. It really did. At least I felt it did. And that would be the kind of thing that I would have gone to see, that I wouldn't have been surprised if a studio had made and put it out. I would have gone to a theater and went, man, that was amazing, partially because of Chad Boseman's amazing performance. Same with Viola Davis. I mean, incredible performances. But when you think about the kinds of movies that are being honored, I think what to me is more interesting is that the Academy Awards have now become more about the show itself and the criticism of the show, and rather than what it's actually honoring. And I did feel that there was, well, the Academy Awards were demythologized, and they have been. We're so cynical about them, and we make fun of them. And I never did when I was growing up. I love the Academy Awards. Maybe the Snow White year was the one of the worst things I'd seen. But, you know, I miss Billy Crystal having a host come in and do some flamboyant opening sequence, because that felt cinematic. It felt like the movies, man. And I appreciate them trying to make this show different than what it was. But I think we're demythologizing too much of our world. And even movies themselves, they're either billion-dollar propositions or they're more slices of life tales. You know, I'm really excited about the fact that I'm finally going to get Basic Instinct on 4K, that Studio Canal spent the money to do a brand new transfer of the movie. I look at Basic Instinct. I love Basic Instinct. Not much of a shred of reality in it. It's a fantasy. It's this phantasmagorical trip into a San Francisco. I mean, look, the club in that movie, in the church, maybe there's clubs like that, but that club was completely made up for the film. To me, I believe that movie, but that to me was grand Hollywood thriller entertainment. Belongs in the same kind of category as Girl with the Dragon Tattoo or as Gone Girl. And I mean the original Swedish Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I mean, I miss those stories. I miss those. Those are the bread and butter of my film interest. Those kinds of tales. I love my MCU, as you know. And I love, intimate films like Nomadland or Terrence Malick's Tree of Life. But Tree of Life seems like an intimate, small movie that has a very expansive feel to it. But like everything else, I feel like our cynicism and our I don't know what it is. We lack those mythologies that we bought into. I'd love to go back to the theater and see a movie like Back to the Future. I don't necessarily mean a time-traveling movie with a DeLorean in it, but something that's a wonderful pop entertainment that, from its very conception, a camera panning across Doc Brown's clocks with a automatic dog food opener that's been clearly emptying dog food out for a long time, you're immediately put into a world that doesn't entirely exist, but it's a wonderful world that we'd always want to be a part of, I think, despite the fact that there are terrorists looking for plutonium and you might get wiped from existence going back through time. You see a movie like Back to the Future and it puts a big smile on your face. And I'm wondering, is Hollywood going to get back to that kind of thing? I mean, now, content. But I think what we need to recapture is, well, the wonderful mythological nature of life. The wonder of the movies is sort of being systematically stripped away from everything. And I don't know if we're ever going to get that back, but I think we should try. And I want to say congratulations to all the Oscar winners, because one of the things that I feel is forgotten is how much work and how much wonder, even though these movies tend to be smaller, whether it is something like Minari or Mank or Nomadland or The Sound of Metal, these films and the people that made them still bring that magic and alchemy to the big screen, or unfortunately, only the small screen. There still is straw being turned into gold by all the Rumpelstiltskins that still work in the film business. So if nothing else, let's hope everybody starts to seek these movies out, because there's still a lot there that is definitely worth experiencing, and I think that's pretty cool. Anyway, I figured I just wanted to say that, I don't know, that was kind of the way it made me feel today. A little melancholy about the state of Hollywood, but nothing wrong with that. This letter comes from Pedro Ferreira. Let's start with Pedro. Hi, Rob. This will be a slightly different letter from me. I was watching YouTube last night, and for some odd reason, I got recommended your Robservations 328 show. Remember that one, Rob? I can refresh your memory. It was from February 1st, 2020, and featured you and your sister describing how you found each other after 30 years. Not sure why I got that particular show recommended, but I started watching, and while I skimmed through a few minutes here and there, I ended up watching almost all 2 hours of it. Do people normally spend their time going back and watching 2-hour podcasts from a year or so before? Maybe, but I find it's generally uncommon. I found myself hooked to the entire story. Everything from the phone call from the lawyer to all the tragic death of your biological mother. It was compelling stuff with so many coincidences, it all comes across like fate. It made me sad and happy watching various parts. People in the comments say it would make a great movie. I just couldn't stop thinking that this is the best episode of Long Lost Family never made. You should contact the company that made that show and see if you can retroactively get it produced as a special. You revealing that you have trouble understanding and providing emotions when they should be necessary interested me. If you believe in astrology, that's more a trait of a Taurus, so you're not alone at all, if you believe in that stuff, which I do not. I believe, but then again, I'm hoping that you don't go crazy when seeing a red or pink flag. I also found it amazing that you almost didn't exist. For one person's existence to rely on a 50-50 chance is incredible. A lot of us are most likely to be successfully born, but not all of us have that chance. The fact that it could have gone either way for you is amazing, and it makes me appreciate how lucky we are to have you. Let me just interject there. So yes, for many of you who might not know, I was adopted. I was bought and paid for when I came out of the womb, so I lived with my adoptive parents and family from the time I was a week old. I found out when I was 29 years old I had a 100% biological sister, Colleen, who was 14 months younger than me. And things sort of went from there. As far as astrology, I don't necessarily believe in astrology, but I do think there's probably something to be said for the time that you're born. I'm sure can the same way that the moon affects the tides, and depending on what time of year you're born and where you're born and under the stars, I mean, the way you're born could definitely have some kind of effect. I think we're on a planet that has gravitational pulls, and who's to say that being at a certain time at a certain place under certain stars doesn't make you a certain kind of a person, because maybe one day we'll have scientific evidence of that. But right now I don't really know, so I don't really believe in astrology. But you know what? Maybe I'll turn my my thing I did with my sister into a short take for the channel so people can watch it. I'm going to go on with Pedro's letter. Last year, someone who I was once Facebook friends with passed away from lung cancer. His name was David Wise. He was a big animation and TV writer. His most significant work, apart from the 80s Transformers cartoon series, was adapting and writing for the Fred Wolf Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon series. That's what I most remembered him for when I sent him a friend request. I didn't know at that point I had Asperger's or autism, and perhaps that played a part in managing to make him dislike me enough to unfriend me. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. To be honest, there were factors on his side involved, such as strong left-wing political ideals, and he was quite the opposite to you in how he spoke to fans. I don't think he had patience for people like me who made, in his opinion, stupid comments. Even me wishing him a late happy birthday was met with ungratefulness, so I couldn't win. This, of course, is getting off the point, and perhaps one day I'll put my thoughts better about the whole thing into a letter. Social media, as you can imagine, isn't always great to understand a person. Isn't always a great way to understand a person. My point is that I used to defend him every week on a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles forum I visited against fans who thought he was a hack, but he never found out I did that and never understood I appreciated him even when he was unnecessarily rude to me. Maybe if more people had shown their appreciation of him as an individual, he'd have been emotionally stronger to combat his cancer. So on behalf of everyone in the Post-Geek Singularity, I just want to say thank you for doing these podcasts, and thank you for putting the effort into all of this. Thank you for reading all my letters and having the patience to go through them. It does mean a lot. You were born, and for many close to that, and for many close, that was fucking metal. Kind regards, Pedro. Well, I appreciate that, Pedro. One of the things that I find amusing is, as many of you know, we're doing a show called Midnight Metal. I am decidedly, spoiler alert, not a particularly metal person. And there was somebody sent in a super chat about the list of bands that they were listening to, and they had written it as Decide. And it's Deicide. And I read it as Decide. People called me out, and somebody even said, one of the comments were like, the fact that this show is metal is ridiculous. And I'm like, look, that's part of it. Of course it's ridiculous. It's by design. It's supposed to be me going, fucking metal. If you don't understand that the idea of it is absurd on the face of it, well, it is absurd. You're supposed to laugh. Anyway, I thought, what a nice letter, Pedro. Thank you. Jermaine K. writes in again. Hi, Rob. Thanks for reading my previous letters. A question for you about classic Star Trek. How do you feel about Section 31? I find the idea very intriguing, both on DS9 and Enterprise. I love the twist of Lieutenant Reed being a member, but I wonder just how far their authorization goes. Is there anything Section 31 is forbidden to do? I mean, they tried to kill all the founders. Speaking of classic Trek, I had an idea for your 700th show. How about discussing your top 5 or top 10 favorite episodes from every series? Maybe get some input from other viewers as well, or other YouTubers. Hopefully that idea doesn't sound too boring. Laugh out loud. Thanks and take care. Well, Section 31 was introduced by Ira Steven Behr in Deep Space Nine. And I always thought what was so intriguing about it is the whole thing was represented by Sloane. That's it. Of course, they touched on it as well in Enterprise, but I liked the idea that you really didn't know. Like Section 31 as an intelligence apparatus seemed like, well, the Federation might need something like that. I think it flies in the face of the utopian ideals of Gene Roddenberry's future. But I like the idea, especially because it was only ever Sloane. And, of course, you find out more about it in Enterprise, but it still was low-key. They completely missed the point in Discovery, as they have about every single thing ever introduced in Star Trek. I mean, I've never seen a show or any kind of use of IP that is so woefully misguided than Star Trek Discovery is. But, I already feel that way. So, anyway. Yeah, I like the idea of it as it's presented in Deep Space Nine, that you don't really know. That there's a group maybe acting on its own, maybe part of the Starfleet Charter. Do we really know it? Who knows? And if it is part of the Starfleet Charter, maybe Section 31 put it there in the first place. So, I do like the idea of Section 31, though. Colin writes in. Colin says, Hey, Rob. On an episode of the John Campea Show, you said something to the effect of, Oscars are for films that address something about the human experience. And you didn't think particularly that the comic book movie genre had done that. Do you still feel the same? And if not, do you think the genre is capable of that? I've been rewatching Antonioni's Ennui trilogy as I finish up a review for you, and it was jarring to watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier afterwards. I also recently rewatched Breathless and Linklater's Before trilogy, and it's hard for me to take a superhero movie seriously as an Oscar contender. I don't have a tight definition on what I think deserves an Oscar, but the idea of a superhero movie being taken as seriously as any of the films I just listed makes me chuckle. I'm right there with you. I know how snobbish that sounds, and I realize that what qualifies for an Oscar is probably changing just like everything else is, and that's normal. Falcon and the Winter Soldier isn't exactly subtle, but there's a lot to like about it, and if it came out 20 years ago, I'd have been amazed at how it tackles certain issues. But I just see a big difference between it and the conversations between Jesse and Celine. I know you can bring up Phoenix's performance in Joker, and rightly so, but I wouldn't be the first one to say you could drop the Gotham references and the film would be a good portrayal of a mentally ill man hitting the hard realizations about life. As it stands, he doesn't seem like a criminal mastermind, but just a sad, pathetic man who needs help and probably couldn't knock over a grocery store, much less hold the city hostage on purpose. The director has basically said he couldn't get the film made without slapping a comic book sheen on it, so I'm not sure it belongs in the conversation. Maybe I'm wrong. Can you see a sequel with Batman in it? I cannot. I look at a film like Unforgiven and William Money saying he's killed women and children. He's killed everything that's walked or crawled. And I know even the Punisher can't say that. It's a movie about how we don't know why this man changed for his wife and how unknowable all of us are. Not just killers with a gift for violence. It's about ambiguity, and superhero movies are very much about spelling things out. What do you think? If you disagree, I'm curious to hear your take. Don't get me wrong, I dig my superhero fare, and I'm as stoked as you are about Moon Knight, maybe even more so. But I think money and fan love is enough, and I'm not sure they deserve critical love and Oscars too. I'm not up on modern criticism, but I do wonder what serious published critics make of these movies, and what a filmmaker like yourself thinks about them basically being placed on the same level as some of the greatest films ever made. Thanks so much for your time, and best regards, Colin. Colin, this is a fan-fucking-tastic letter and a great question. I've often thought that Oscar films should definitely have a universality to them, a universal quality where they transcend the medium cinema, they transcend the genre of story that they exist within, and they have something, a truth that we all know at the very fiber of the essence, of the core of our being. And I think something like Nomadland has that kind of a story. I think what it's trying to say about the human condition and what it says about America and what it says about our modern age is actually quite profound. And in my mind, it's exactly the kind of a movie that should win the Oscar. Now, on the other hand, look at a film like Avengers Endgame. Avengers Endgame is an incredible popcorn sci-fi superhero entertainment. You know how much I love the MCU. But is there anything in Endgame that we haven't seen presented with more profundity than it is in Endgame? And I think the answer to that is no. And there's nothing wrong with that. Avengers Endgame is a stunning achievement in fantasy filmmaking. You put it together with Infinity War and watch it, it's an amazing cinematic experience. But ultimately, at its core, Endgame is still a movie about comic book characters essentially beating people up. And sure, you get moments when Sam Wilson says, "On your left, the portal's open, the battle is joined." And it's a great, cathartic, incredible moment in fantasy filmmaking history. But is it Oscar caliber? Certainly, technically it is. But I don't know if there's a lot in Endgame that would make it transcend its genre. Endgame is the pinnacle of the comic book movie. But I don't think it transcends its genre. Joker might very well do just that. It's commentary. I mean, we know it's a Batman. He's going to be a Batman villain. But is he? I mean, I don't think we need a Batman movie with a Batman that's going to fight Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. I think it would be completely beside the point. I think the great thing about Joker is that it transcended its genre. and that's why it's important. But I do think, like, I'm sorry, as much as I love Infinity War and Endgame and even Black Panther, I don't think movies like that deserve to win Best Picture. They do not transcend the comic book genre. They are the comic book genre. They represent great examples of comic book movies, but I don't think they transcend the genre, and I don't think they dig deep enough into those human truths because they're not even trying to. Those movies are not about human truths of everyday life that we all can understand. And yet, someone would come and say to me, well, Rob, why is Lawrence of Arabia worthy of that? Why is Gandhi worthy of that? Well, because they were real people. And for the most part, the stories that are portrayed in these films, or Puyi, The Last Emperor, same kind of thing, about an extraordinary man put in an extraordinary place at an extraordinary moment of time that acted extraordinarily. So these are real things, and I think by seeing what happened to these men, after all, we think that Gandhi is this revered figure, but at one point he was just somebody's kid shitting in his diapers, and he grew up to be what he grew up to be. Same with Puyi, same with Lawrence, T.E. Lawrence. I mean, all of these people, they were once normal folks, and to see their stories have something to tell us. Captain America, I love Steve Rogers, and I think, again, he represents something simplistic, but something that's deep, deep, deep inside of us. I just don't know if the truths that are in superhero movies are necessarily hard ones to make people understand. I think they're baked into the material. But I agree with you. Do I think Infinity War and Endgame should win Best Picture? I do not. But I love them. I think they're great examples of their genre. So, good letter, though. I very much appreciate that. Here's a letter from Kenny McBride. Kenny says, hi, Rob. For a long time, Enterprise was widely accepted as the worst thing in the Star Trek universe. Obviously, now things have changed for a lot of people, as Discovery and Picard managed to find whole new ways to upset hardened Trekkies. But I remember quite enjoying Enterprise when I was younger and decided to revisit recently to see if it really was as bad as its reputation suggests. The pilot, Broken Bow, is a lot of fun. It's humanity's first encounter with the Klingons, but I think it's Broken Bow. It is. It's humanity's first encounter with the Klingons, and while the Vulcan ambassador recommends letting the injured Klang die to fit with Klingon beliefs about honor and death, the humans, especially Captain Archer, object with their human arrogance about their own beliefs. According to Archer, the Vulcans have been holding humanity back in the near century since Ephraim Cochrane's first flight, and this is just one more example of that. Of course, we know the Vulcans are not wrong about Klingon culture, but Archer is clearly not wrong about their arrogance. As the story progresses, we learn that he was right to take Klang home, albeit for the wrong reasons. Archer's mistrust of the Vulcans and his determination to live his values even against the better judgment of his human and Vulcan colleagues is a defining feature of the series. For me, Broken Bow is at least as entertaining and intriguing as Encounter at Farpoint or Caretaker. The pilot also introduces us to Archer's crew as well as the key players still on Earth. The Vulcan sub-commander T'Pol becomes Archer's first officer. There's mutual mistrust from the beginning and a serious amount of condescension from T'Pol. Condescension, not condensation. Condescension from T'Pol, leading to a very interesting character development as she gets to know the humans and comes to understand and empathize with the humans' frustration with the High Council of Vulcan High Command. Seeing Vulcan culture through her eyes over the following seasons and how Vulcan culture changes as a result of their interactions with the Enterprise and its crew is one of the more interesting elements of the show, and Jolene Blaylock's performance is always entertaining. Commander Charles Trip Tucker is the Enterprise's chief engineer and Archer's closest friend. He's enthusiastic about getting into deep space and getting to open the new engine up to its maximum of warp 5 and is perhaps even more suspicious of the Vulcans than Archer. He serves as the emotional McCoy to T'Pol's Spock and Archer's Kirk as the three major players throughout the show. Later on, his thirst for vengeance after his sister is killed in the Xindi attack on Earth and his burgeoning relationship with T'Pol add more and more depth to his character. The bridge crew is completed by Comms Officer Hoshi Sato, Empress Sato, Tactical Officer Malcolm Reed, and Helmsman Travis Mayweather. Sato is a linguistic genius who plays a vital role in communicating with the new species before she perfects the universal translator. She's also afraid of being in deep space and deeply unsure of her own abilities, but can't bear the thought of not being out here to hear new languages and make new connections. I'm pretty sure she'd figure it out Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra, at least as quickly as Picard. Reed is a stiff upper-lip Englishman from a long line of naval officers, always ready and perhaps a little too willing to die nobly at his post. It might not be terribly obvious to an American viewer, but while Reed is something of a parody of the great British officer class, there's actually a ton of pathos when we realize that his emotionless parents are actually disappointed in him for not joining the Navy like a proper Reed. Mayweather is a space boomer, born in deep space to a family of low-warp freighter haulers. In early episodes, his knowledge of life in deep space proves his value to the crew, but as the ship goes on further, this expertise becomes less and less useful, and Travis sadly gets the least development of all the major characters. The main crew is rounded out by the wonderful Dr. Phlox. Phlox is from a long-lived and extremely polyamorous world of Denobula, and has a wonderful curiosity and open-mindedness about humanity and all the other species the crew encounters. He's probably my favorite character in the show, and his warmth and openness contrast well with the more cold and aloof T'Pol, especially in the earlier episodes. He is, of course, a forehead-bumps alien, a long line of such aliens in Star Trek, but there's an excellent, quite subtle visual effect used just a few times in the series to make his grin freakishly wide. That effect, more than anything I've seen in any other Star Trek show, sells the idea that Phlox really is an alien and not just a human under a ton of makeup. Most of the stories in Enterprise are Monster Problem of the Week episodes, just like in TOS, TNG, and Voyager. But even before we get to the Xindi arc in Season 3, the show is different because we're seeing humanity's first encounters with all the peoples and wonders of the galaxy. Everything that happens to them will have consequences later on, whether in Enterprise itself or in the other shows. The Season 1 highlight of the style of storytelling is probably P'Jem, in which the Enterprise encounters a remote Vulcan monastery, and they have their first encounter with the Andorians, led by Jeffrey Combs' marvelous Shran. In this episode, we see a dark side of the Vulcans we haven't seen before, and Archer is forced to question his relationship to the only species that has thus far been an ally to Earth. P'Jem, it turns out, is being used as a long-range monitoring station, and the Andorians have every right to be angry about it. Archer helps Shran uncover the truth, leaving Andorian commanders with a grudging respect for his new pink-skin acquaintance, and telling Archer that he owes the... I think you meant to say that P'Jem turns out to be a long-range monitoring station for the Vulcans. Yes. This sets up a through line for Shran that takes us all the way to the end of Season 4, as he and Archer assist each other, slowly building the respect and trust they need to enable the earliest cooperation between what will become the Federation's founding members. The development of the Vulcans on Enterprise is interesting, too. This is the mid-22nd century, long before Spock and the archetype of Vulcanhood that he would become for Star Trek fans. Before the Federation, before human warp flight, we learned that the Vulcans really were a bit sneaky, arrogant, and belligerent. The aforementioned P'Jem shows us they can't necessarily be trusted about their actions and stated motives. We also meet a ship full of renegade Vulcans who appear to have learned how to control their emotions. One of them turns out to be a really bad guy, though, and his forced mind meld with T'Pol leads us later to a pretty heavy-handed but ultimately quite effective metaphor about how our current society has regarded people with HIV. Later, we end up on Vulcan itself, where we learn just how far the Vulcans have strayed from the teachings of Surak. We encounter the Klingons again, including multiple appearances by Duras, son of Toral. It's never spelled out to us that he's an ancestor of Duras, son of Gerard from TNG. But sharp-eyed fans will notice the similarities in their cranial ridges. Enterprise helps develop the Klingon culture even beyond what we got in TNG. We see Archer put on trial, and we meet his lawyer, who laments the rise of the warrior class, who have forgotten that honor and justice go together. Later, we encounter a Klingon doctor, intelligent but somewhat ashamed of his failure to enter the warrior caste, as the Klingons try to get Phlox to save them from a mysterious plague that may wipe out the species. This is also the story which explains the absence of cranial ridges on the Klingons in TOS in a rather delightful way. Incidentally, this also demonstrates that Discovery either doesn't take place in the same timeline as the previous series or that its producers just didn't care about canon. I'll let you and my fellow Imagination Connoisseurs decide which. Throughout the show, but especially in the first two seasons, we also see quite a bit of thought put into how the more primitive NX-01 works as compared to the NCC-1701 and its successors. Transporters are a new and somewhat frightening technology for the crew, so shuttle pods and docking ports play a big role. Scanners are more primitive, the engine's limits are unknown, and the ship's tactical capabilities level of preparation is pretty limited. Some of these limits help to add drama and tension to certain stories, but it's also pretty fun to watch what is essentially a historical drama for those of us who have spent a big part of our lives in the 23rd and 24th centuries. Of course, the show isn't perfect. The Season 1 episode Unexpected, for example, is a very, very silly one, and sadly turns into something that is basically a sexual assault into a joke because, ha ha ha, imagine if a man got pregnant. There's nothing that's quite as cringeworthy as Code of Honor from TNG's first season, but certainly there are episodes with problems. There's a bit of the white savior vibed Captain Archer as he manages to not only hold Surak's Katra and teach T'Pol about her own culture, but he also manages to easily defeat Shran in his culture's ritual combat. Everyone in the galaxy becomes better for just having known Jonathan Archer. By the 21st century, when the show was produced, we should have been able to be a bit more nuanced about humanity's place in the galaxy than that. The ending of the series is also incredibly rushed, and the final episode was a terrible piece of judgment by its producers. Will Riker did not belong on Enterprise. Ultimately, though, the biggest thing Enterprise had working against it was that god-awful song of the opening credits. I know the showrunners wanted a different feeling for their show from what had been seen in other Star Trek up to that point, but a cheesy ballad was not the way to go. It even managed to get worse when they added a heavier beat in Season 4. The Season 3-4 remix. What's even worse is that over the closing credits, they have a great tune called Archer's Theme. That would have made an excellent opening theme. It was supposed to be. That wouldn't have felt the same as other shows, but it would have developed Enterprise feel as part of the same universe. Faith of the Heart made the show feel dated as soon as it aired. I just rewatched the whole series on Netflix, and it really hits differently when you have that skip intro button available. I firmly believe that if the song hadn't been a part of the show, it might have lasted longer than it did. As it is, I think everyone having to listen to Russell Watson at the start of every show meant nobody ever really gave Enterprise a fair shot. I know New Trek has been a thorn in your side for a while, Rob, but it's important that we temper our criticism of the things we don't like for praise of the things that we do. I agree. And Enterprise deserves a lot more praise than it got at the time. No, it's not as good as peak TNG, but what is? I think it's at least as good as Voyager for most of its run and better in a lot of places. If you haven't watched it in a while or if you've avoided it based on what you've heard, I strongly recommend you give it a try. Live long and prosper, Rob, and everyone else in the Post-Geek Singularity. Kenny McBride. Kenny, I want to thank you for writing that letter. What a great sort of, reassessment, and you honor the show. I think Enterprise was wildly inconsistent, and I think one of the problems is that Rick Berman and Brandon Braga wrote a lot of the episodes themselves, and I think that they were suffering a little bit from Star Trek burnout, and unfortunately their original take on the show, which was much more, they were going to wait till the end of the first season to actually launch Enterprise and really delve into the socio-political earth of that time, would have been really interesting. But of course, it was nixed by the network. They didn't like that idea. But I do think there's a lot of great episodes of Enterprise in those first couple seasons. Cogenitor is one of my favorite Star Trek episodes of all, by the way. If for no other reason than you meet the Enterprise, the NX-01 runs into another survey mission. They're both doing the same thing. It's kind of a first contact story where they come across people studying the same star as they do. But there's a lot to like about Enterprise, and of course, the fourth season does a tremendous job in a lot of episodes. The 3-part Vulcan series, beginning with The Forge, that was written by the Reeve Stevens, go a long way towards setting the table for the rest of Star Trek. So, absolutely, definitely, good stuff. This one comes from David Kukol. David Kukol says, "Hi, Rob. Here's a deep-cut Star Trek topic for you, and I'd really be interested in hearing your point of view. Jerome Bixby, who also wrote Mirror Mirror, Jerome Bixby's Requiem for Methuselah was discussed this week on the Treksperts Briefing Room. This is a well-made, well-acted episode that contains some excellent ideas and a few problematic ones as well. I have never heard my reservations discussed by fans. Spoilers for a 52-year-old episode. Flint, played very well by James Daly, he's an amazing, amazing actor, is revealed to be an immortal human who, over the course of his enormous lifetime, was Brahms and Leonardo da Vinci. He fashioned these guises for himself and created the works of art attributed to these men. He even lived as King Solomon, Alexander the Great, and Merlin. According to my research, the first draft of the script suggested that Flint was also Christ, Moses, Picasso, and Beethoven, and these never made it to the final broadcast. I'm surprised the episode didn't get meta and suggest that Flint was Gene Roddenberry as well. While Flint's backstory is a fascinating idea on one level, it also bothers me. Not enough to cause unrest in my personal life, I might add, but consider this. You end your shows by stating that every person you meet has a story to tell. Well, according to this episode of Trek, only one person has a story to tell. Flint says he's been all of these men named above and many more. The genius of the human race seems concentrated in one individual. Rather than humankind producing many different artists, inventors, and world builders, our race only produced this guy. Well, David, he wasn't every artist. He was just a lot of the main ones you can count on a couple of hands. His immortality is an aberration. Does this mean his genius is a fluke too? This suggests to me that the rest of the human race is a bunch of fools. Where would our species be if Flint had never been born? I guess we'd all be apes waiting for a Kubrick monolith to elevate our status. The story of Flint seems to fly in the face of Star Trek's core idea, that humanity is capable of great things. Instead, we have one great guy and the rest of us are losers. There's still much to enjoy about Requiem for Methuselah, but as I stated above, I've never heard this issue discussed by fans. What are your thoughts? Keep up the great work. Regards, David Kukol. Well, David, I would say, look, there are many different men in history, and he was only a few of them. But I think that if you look at the progression, the idea that he was able to take these copious talents of his, and also he had many, many years to develop other talents because he was immortal. Yeah, they dropped a few names, but I think that he was only a few of those people. And eventually, remember, how many times would he have had to go into hiding? Or that's never really bothered me. It's an interesting point that I think I might have to ponder. But I mean, it's not like there have been hundreds, thousands, millions of people that have affected mankind. And I don't think just because Flint was a few of those people doesn't mean the rest of us are losers. I think there's and remember, how many people does history even remember? There's a lot of great people that, because of the way we didn't have the kind of recording technology we have now, obviously, and when I mean that, whether it's videos or whether it's the internet or something else, how many great men and women throughout history have been forgotten by history because they just didn't, their exploits weren't recorded. So it doesn't really bother me, but I think that it's a really interesting take on the character. I really like that. Sky writes in and says, "Hi, Rob. I finished the last episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier. There will be spoilers ahead. Viewers have been warned." I think we're far enough away. It's okay. On a positive note, the scenes with Sam and Isaiah were great and inspiring. Sam's speech to the senator was mostly good, and perhaps the most emotional scene for me was when Bucky confessed to Mr. Nakajima. The arrival and action taken by Zemo's butler was a surprise. But now for some negatives. The reveal of the power broker was obvious to the point that I thought it was misdirection, and it felt like pretty bad writing. Maybe it will sit better with me upon a rewatch, but it's hard to imagine the path taken to arrive in this position given that character's history. It was great to see Sam as the new Cap, but the action was bizarre and all over the place. I thought so too. At one point, there's a helicopter spinning out of control, and he and Red Wing effortlessly match the rotation, break through the doors, and safely take the pilots out. I know. Then the other helicopter's propeller, yes, there are two in this stuff scene, hits Cap's shield. When this happened, my instant reaction was, oh, now this helicopter is going to crash. But, oh, no, it was fine. Okay. Then there just so happens to be a captive on board that can fly the helicopter and does an audible countdown, which was off time anyway. And this bugged me. The worst was when Sam stops the vehicle from falling over the edge and pushes it back up. What? Is he a super soldier now? I get that he used the propulsion from his wings, but that's not how it would work at all. If the jetpack was strong enough to lift the weight off the vehicle, Sam would be crushed in between. Sigh. It's not even apparent that his suit is vibranium, which might have helped me believe it. I think it is because it came from Wakanda. I haven't had any questions with the action all season, but this episode had me questioning it a lot. I'm right there with you. I thought the action in the sixth episode was pretty absurd. I felt a disconnect in the fight between Sam and Carly. She was so insistent on Sam fighting back, it seemed as if she had a death wish. I know she was willing to die for her cause, but forcing this fight wasn't for her cause, though Sam did mention it in his speech. Sam's refusal to fight her felt strange and is arguably the reason her story ended the way it did. Sorry this was a little long. What are your thoughts? Did any of this bug you too? Side note, I can pay the membership fee via... Can I pay the membership fee via PayPal? Yeah. I can't send money via YouTube from Macau. Please get back to me. Have a better day. Yeah, no, you can pay the membership fee via PayPal. Absolutely. You know, as a matter of fact, if you just the same thing that you tip with on the channel, you could, and I can hook you up and make you a member. So the link for the tip is in the episode description. I agree. I like Falcon and Winter Soldier more about what it had to say and the way it addressed certain issues. Was it perfect? No. I'm sure that it was actually the first episode or first show that they made out of the gate, so I was expecting a little bit more rocky storytelling. I thought the action that was really encompassed the first half of the 6th episode was all over the place, and I agree, it went a little too far, and I think they probably realized that later on, but it had already been shot, so what are they going to do? Yeah, the Sam thing with his keeping him aloft, that whole, I don't think there's enough thrust in his wings to be able to do that, but what are you going to do? Maybe there was some anti-gravity thing that was in the suit that we haven't seen yet. But definitely, I agree with what you are saying there. Absolutely. Let's see. Kenny Crayley Jr. says, "Dear Robert, hey Robert and members of the Post-Geek Singularity, I'm back with another letter." All right, Kenny. And for today's letter, I wanted to talk about the DC Comics television universe on the CW, sometimes now known as the CW-verse, and its beginning. It started in 2001 with Smallville. For those of you who don't know, Smallville was a 10-season-long show about the origin of Clark Kent before he became the Man of Steel. I've reviewed the show on my other social media pages, so I won't review it here. For me, Smallville had good seasons and bad seasons. My favorite seasons are the first half of Season 6 plus Seasons 9 and 10. Then in 2011, the Arrowverse started on the CW with Arrow, then The Flash, DC's Legends of Tomorrow, Supergirl, Black Lightning, Batwoman. I know, some don't like the show, but whatever. And now Superman and Lois, which is a super fantastic series so far. All the casts of all these shows are amazing and diverse. Also, the show's writing issues aside, the writing in these shows is, at times, a heck of a lot better than Star Trek Discovery by a wide margin. Sure, the shows are not always the best of quality as far as superhero TV goes, but I enjoy this universe and have since the days of Smallville. Could some of the writing be better and not push the social diversity issues, etc. on them so much? Yes, and a lot of them tend to get heavy-handed with their messaging and a bit cheesy at times, but you've got to give Warner Brothers Television credit for the quality of the productions given the limited TV budgets they've had to work with. They create such good content for these DC TV shows, not always the best, but nothing is perfect. Who knew after Smallville the universe of DC Comics on TV would expand? That is quite the feat to create a whole universe of shows, and each one, from Arrow to Superman and Lois, is very different in terms of tone. I do enjoy this DC TV universe of shows, both on the CW and HBO Max, and I'm excited for the future of DC Comics on television. Thanks, Rob, for all that you do, and keep up the super amazing work. Sincerely, longtime watcher, listener, Kelly Crayley from... Kelly? God, I know your name's Kenny. Kenny Crayley Jr. from Ohio. Well, Kenny, what a nice letter. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that the CW DC universe has been pretty consistent. I really like Superman and Lois so far. Some of their, the Flash can get a little long in the tooth, but for the most part, they've been fun. I think they've set out to do, me, I'm always about authorship. Did those shows set out to do what they wanted to do? And I would say yes, they have. Some seasons have obviously been better than others, but for the most part, I think they've been pretty good. They've been pretty good. So yeah, I definitely, I'm with you. I think they're good shows. Omar94 wrote a letter in. I bet you're surprised. Omar94 says, "Hi, Rob, moderators in the Post-Geek Singularity. This is my own ignorance with what I'm trying to say, but the most recent Oscar show got me thinking about the award show overall. I know the Oscars is the biggest night for the movies, and it's meant to be a celebration of them, but I've started to question the purpose of the show. The only reason I'm doing so is because if it's all subjective with what people find good or bad, I don't see what the importance of what one group of voters determined to be the best that year, since each individual person watching movies will have his or own personal opinion about what movies, performances, scores, direction, and all of that were good. It's the same thing with the Emmys, as it's all subjective with what people find good or bad. So I don't see the importance of one group of voters, since each person has his or her own opinion on what TV shows, performances, and all of that were good. That's what I've been thinking about other award shows, as well as like the Golden Globes, the SAG Awards, and all of those. This has been something that I've been thinking about for some time. As I said earlier, this is my ignorance with what I'm trying to say. Omar94. Well, Omar, appreciate you writing in about that. Look, I think that we as human beings always want to quantify things. You know, when I was a kid, one of my favorite books that I had was the Book of Lists. That's all it was a book of lists. Actually, I found out my Uncle Ed, who's passed away, my Uncle Ed was number 3 on President Nixon's original enemies list when he was editor-in-chief of the Los Angeles Times. People like to quantify things. You know, how can you not? What's your favorite episode of this? What's your favorite record? Who's your favorite artist, Picasso or Monet? Like who and how do you quantify it? How do you quantify those things? You know, I don't know. You know, if you're going to have a Sunday in the park with George, how do you compare a pointillist to a Picasso, an abstract painter like that? I mean, that's some craziness right there. I don't know. But people love to do it. So I think human nature is to quantify things. And when you're going to give out the Academy Awards, the idea of giving excellence, giving out awards for excellence, and you decide you have to pick 5, you know, you can look there and like the actors get to pick, the actors branch picks the best acting. So they know what acting is, you know, which actors are good. Now, not everyone's going to have the same opinion, but if you have 5 of them, the people that get the most votes win, apparently. And I just think that's human nature. I don't mind that. I think that we have a need to quantify things in our lives. You know, also, people don't have enough time. And I think in a way, for the most part, I think if you watch most of the Oscar-winning films, they're all pretty worthwhile. There's only been a few I'm like the Greatest Show on Earth, I don't know. But for the most part, I'm surprised at how good Oscar-winning films are, even if films are just nominated. They're usually pretty good, and it's kind of an indicator of what people should go watch, if nothing else, because we are a kind of species of people that, man, do we love figuring out or hearing about what people think is good or not. We're just that way. And I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. Speaking of Enterprise, guess who's here with the letter? That's White. That's White. Willow. That's White. Willow's back. Willow Yang. Willow. Willow's here with another letter. By the way, I did suggest we do a show maybe once a month together. Have not heard back from Willow. No pressure, Willow. Just saying. Willow writes in and says, "Greetings, Rob. As I mentioned in a previous letter, I've commenced my first viewing of Star Trek Enterprise. Here are my brief thoughts for the first 4 episodes following the pilot. Fight or flight. The Enterprise comes across an adrift Axanar ship whose crew has been murdered, and Hoshi has to convince another Axanar ship arriving on the scene that the Enterprise wasn't responsible for the crime. While I'm a bit disappointed that the series didn't continue on the temporal Cold War storyline after the open-ended conclusion of Broken Bow, I do think that Fight or Flight is a decent follow-up to the pilot. The scene of the Enterprise crew finding the strung-up bodies of the murdered Axanar was effectively creepy. It actually is somewhat reminiscent of the Firefly episode Bushwhack, where the crew comes across a ship that had been attacked by Reavers. I also like the debate that Archer and T'Pol had over whether they should lend aid. It's a good reminder to the audience that the Prime Directive hasn't yet been established, and the crew are given much more freedom to choose their best course of action in the absence of an established set of rules and protocols. I was initially annoyed by Hoshi when she started having a breakdown after being asked to communicate with the Axanar captain, but after dwelling on it longer, I do think it's an understandable reaction, given that she'd been traumatized earlier and was under a tremendous amount of pressure. I hope to see her character and the other crew members grow and develop over the course of the series, as Deep Space Nine has successfully done with its cast of characters. Strange New World. The crew explore an alien planet where they begin seeing mysterious humanoid creatures due to hallucinogenic plant spores, and the humans grow suspicious of T'Pol. Star Trek has done a number of horror episodes, and while this one didn't really stand out to me as one of the greats, I still thought it was decent. The episode does remind me a bit of the Next Generation's Identity Crisis, with the crew investigating a mysterious planet where things were happening. The incident with one of the crew members in the transporter getting beamed up with plants merged inside of his body was effectively cringe-inducing and makes me really hesitant about wanting to get inside a transporter if such technology were invented. I also love that the episode delved more into the tension and mistrust between the human characters and the Vulcans in the pre-Federation era, something I hope will continue on being explored throughout the series. Unexpected, a female Xyrillian accidentally impregnates Trip after he goes over to their ship to help them fix their engine. Okay, as someone who's read a fair amount of Mpreg, I guess, mpreg and slash fiction, I'll be the first to acknowledge that this was not a very good episode. I'm just assuming that the writers meant for this to be comedic, and if that is indeed the case, then the comedy is rather juvenile, as in seeing a man grow extra nipples on his arm type of humor. However, Unexpected does differ from episodes like the original series Turnabout Intruder and Deep Space Nine's Prophet and Lace in that it is played pretty straight. I did actually find the scene of Trip getting paranoid over his colleagues gossiping about his condition quite funny, and I appreciated that the acting didn't get too over the top. The episode does also have some importance to Star Trek canon with the introduction of holodeck technology that's used by the Xyrillians. As an aside, I do find Xyrillian reproduction to be rather bizarre. The whole reason why different sexes exist is to allow genetic recombination so that there will be greater diversity in the population. If female Xyrillians contribute 100% of their DNA to an offspring, why is there even two separate sexes? That completely defeats the purpose of having males in the population. Terra Nova. The Enterprise visits an old human colony that was established on a planet 70 years ago to find that it has been irradiated, with the descendants of the colonists who now call themselves the Novans blaming the humans for what happened. This is my least favorite episode of the 4. Now, I did like the lead up to the crew traveling to the colony, the anticipation in finding out what happened to the colonists, and then it just all goes downhill. The story doesn't make much sense. Firstly, how could the human colonists in the span of 70 years, which is just 2 or 3 generations, have evolved into scaly blue-screen creatures? I don't know. How did Nadette, who was just a regular-looking girl 70 years ago, grow up into an armadillo? Secondly, so children like Nadette were old enough to remember hearing their parents blaming the people of Earth for ruining their colony and to even fend for themselves after the adults had died out, but they weren't old enough to know that their parents and they themselves were also human? Finally, the colonists were shown to be very primitive, which does make sense considering that there were children who had to fend for themselves. So how were they able to manufacture sophisticated firearms? Unless the guns were from 70 years ago, they didn't run out of ammunition after all those years? Logic issues aside, the story itself was boring and uninspired. By depicting the Novans as childish cavemen that are objectively wrong about the facts, the writers robbed the episode of any substantive debate or dialogue. And unlike the preceding episode, Unexpected, Terra Nova didn't even have anything memorable or amusing, or at least anything entertaining. These are just my quick thoughts on the first several episodes of Enterprise. I've almost finished the first season, and it's been a bit of a hit and miss for me. There are some very good episodes like the Andorian Incident and Doctor, some rather painful ones like Rogue Planet and the aforementioned Terra Nova, and a number of middling ones. I do like the main cast of characters, however. I like the aesthetics and set design, and I love the overall premise. I look forward to watching more of the series. Live long and prosper, Willow. Yeah, Willow, it's very hit and miss, and when you get to the 3rd season, it's wildly different from any Trek. And then the 4th season is my favorite. It's everyone's favorite. Once again, a great letter. I very much appreciate it. I can't tell you how much I've loved hearing about your Trek through the entire franchise. It's been a delight reading your letters. So for those of you who want to read more of Willow Yang, her letters on the website, theburnettwork.net, under Willow Talk. So thank you for that, Willow. I appreciate it. Keep them coming. I love that. So indeed, why don't we see what you all are saying back over here? Are you saying anything? I don't know. Let's find out. Let's cut over and see. Nils Gard sends in a tip and says, I just watched Another Round, the Danish winner at the Academy Awards for Best International Feature, starring Mads Mikkelsen. Great film. Then I saw that Leonardo DiCaprio's production company have instantly acquired the rights for a remake. You know, I was talking about this to John Campy this morning before we went on. Another Round, or as Dieter Bastian likes to say, my autobiography, which is kind of funny. Yeah, I mean, it did well. I love the story. It's a wonderful film. And the fact that, look, as John pointed out, it's a Danish movie, and I would like a lot more people to see it, but the fact that it gets remade with Leonardo DiCaprio, by the way, I think it's perfect casting. If Leonardo DiCaprio is going to do it, it means many tens of millions of more people are going to see it. And I think whoever gets to do it, it'll be great. So I totally, I'm excited because I think it's a wonderful movie. Willow says, Why do you think that Sharon Carter's a Skrull? Is it just the fact that Marvel's doing a Secret Invasion series, or do you see evidence in Falcon and the Winter Soldier that indicates she's an imposter? Well, I think she's an imposter because especially of what she says at the end. I don't think the Sharon Carter that we saw in New York City is the Sharon Carter that's in Madripoor. How'd she get there? She's just there. I can't go back home. She's, oh, now I'm in Washington, D.C. Nope. I think she came there. I think we're going to see more of that. And at the end when she's on the phone going, we now have access to the seat of power in the U.S. She's a Skrull. I believe that. And yeah, partly it's because we know Secret Invasion is coming, but I would have said she was a Skrull anyway, even if I didn't, because she's kind of out of character. And I always wondered, well, wait a minute, how'd you get into America? I mean, obviously she probably could, but she's pretty much out in the open after saying she couldn't do that. Andrew Christie is here. Says, Me Too. Hashtag Me Too is the beginning of the end for Hollywood as we knew it. The veil was ripped off and it's been downhill ever since. Couple that with the public intellectuals becoming the new rock stars and exponential tech. What's next? Who knows? Well, that's probably true. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's Me Too. Assholes are assholes everywhere. Oh, Andrew goes on to say, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't somewhat pine for the dreamlike, almost Mount Olympus aura of Hollywood and the American film industry used to have. Hollywood is in the middle of a branding dilemma, battling its hypocrisy, which Ricky Gervais hilariously put on the spotlight on the Globes last year. If they want to recreate the mythic feel it used to have, they need to reevaluate how it's perceived. You're so right, Rob. The Oscars used to feel like a movie-like experience in itself. It's incredible that we're getting so much more diversity. Now, can we keep on doing that and restore the magic at the same time? I think yes. I mean, here's the thing. When I have no problem with diversity and hearing more people speak. I mean, August Wilson and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. I mean, there's a story that needed to be told on a wider level than other than just a play. I mean, August Wilson obviously needs no introduction as the famous playwright, and also we're talking about the Black experience in America, and I think that dealing with blues, literally a Black art form, jazz and blues. And I thought it was fantastic. And I'm like, would that movie have been made 10 years ago? Maybe. August Wilson's a big enough name that maybe it would have been adapted, but I don't know. Getting that cast, it was an important thing. And to me, that's what diversity does. What the kind of thing that diversity allows for is to see things like Ma Rainey's Black Bottom get made. And that to me is like, I'm all about that. What I don't like is what we're doing is we're trading oppressions for one oppression for others. There is a huge battle now being waged because, let's face it, what academia is doing is vilifying Western civilization. And the idea that people are as if, and I've tried to say, like, oh, everybody's a white supremacist, the world is a terrible place. No, the world is not. There was all kinds of oppression throughout all history, all peoples. Depends where you go. We're all put upon, the rich and the poor, the Chinese and the Japanese, the black on black violence in Africa, tribalism, what happens between Sunni and Shia. There's all kinds. Everywhere you go, there's been oppression. There's been horrible treatment of people from other people. What we have to do is get away from that and that kind of oppression. And you see what's going on. Everyone's being, academia would tell you, people are being, there's race studies going on. Critical race theory is being taught. I'm sorry, but the biggest overarching concern in my life has not been white supremacy. Oh, Rob, that's just your privilege talking. No, it's not. I want to get into Hollywood. Hollywood oppresses everybody. Hollywood is discriminatory against anyone. People say, well, Rob, you're a Jew. Maybe. No. No, it's not that easy. There's no office of Jewish privilege that I can go to and be like, yo, shalom, put me in Hollywood, coach. It doesn't work like that. People, life is a struggle for everybody. And in terms of wanting to work in Hollywood and tell stories, it's not the Me Too movement. Anybody that's in any place with power, it's just Hollywood was one of the most visible industries, so we hear more about it than, when you're watching Wolf of Wall Street, look at those motherfuckers, those hedge fund managers. I mean, come on. You don't think the horrors went on? I mean, we got one ogre like Harvey Weinstein who clearly, I mean, he literally was a monster made flesh. Not a very attractive man, very powerful man. And of course, he's a guy that, it's so funny to me because I've met a lot of people like Harvey Weinstein in my life. Guys that might not have been the most physically attractive guys to the opposite sex. So they use their power and influence to get laid. And, you know, by then it's at the forefront of their mind, and they abuse that power, which they shouldn't. And get rid of those motherfuckers. They make life hell for everyone else. They're assholes. They're preying on people, and it makes it harder to date pretty girls myself. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not on the market. But you know what I mean? Like it's just those people need to be gone. Those people are predatory. They're preying on other folks. I don't think it's Me Too. And, you know, people talk about there's all kinds of horrible people in many different industries. It's not just here. And it's not just in Hollywood. It's just Hollywood's the most visible, so you hear about it all the time. But there needed to be a reckoning. Now Scott Rudin is on the chopping block, but everybody knew Scott Rudin's an asshole. And the thing is, you know, he gets power and he wants things the way he wants things, and you wind up in a swimming with sharks situation. You've given me sweet and low. I want equal. Like any sane person would be like, whatever. But, you know, when you get to a certain level, you're indulging all your ridiculousness, and people do it because he's hugely successful, and that happens in any business, not just Hollywood. Anytime you've got a lot of visibility and a lot of money at stake and a lot of power and a lot of ambition, bad shit happens. But luckily in Hollywood, because it is so visible, things are changing, and they needed to change. There's a lot of bad shit going on. Predatory behavior. Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby. I mean, I hate to see these people go down because I admired what Harvey Weinstein did with movies, but the guy was a fucking predator. He was a predator. He had a pathology. He wanted to stick his dick in young, pretty girls, and he was using his power to do it. He is a predator. Bill Cosby, predator. Flat out. Evil, predatory behavior. Psychopathy, right there. I mean, Bill Cosby was drugging women and having their way over the course of decades. That's premeditated, predatory behavior. That kind of behavior it's anti-human. It needs to be exposed, and get it out of there. So, yeah. Robservations says, what I find amusing is that so many film fans hate sports or shun sports fans for rooting for rich athletes, yet those same film fans root for films and rich actors to win a statue. What horse in the race do they have if their film wins? It's funny. Well, I mean, look, obviously, it's the same as sports fans. If your team wins, or if your movie wins, it tells you, even if you're the only person who knows, that you have good taste, that your taste is affirmed by the masses. And I think it's easy to understand. Just like when you want to, it's, you know, I don't think people are necessarily rooting for rich athletes. I mean, when you're watching a game, you know, when I'm watching Russell Wilson scramble on the field when a broken play happens and then he figures out how to connect with Tyler Lockett down the field, when I'm watching something like that happen, I'm not thinking about Wilson being one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL history. I don't think about that. I'm looking at a great athlete who just scrambled around and turned a broken play into an opportunity to score and show off his athletic prowess. And, I mean, you could be cynical about it and go, these people are... No, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how rich they are. They still have to get on a field and show us what they got. The reason he's rich is because he's good, and he's been good because he worked his way up from the time he was a kid. I don't care that people get rich based on the work they do. Why shouldn't they? How rich is Dave Chappelle now? I don't know. I don't care. I love his comedy. I watch Dave Chappelle. The guy makes me laugh. Clip shows up, Dave Chappelle on a talk show from 20 years ago, I'll watch it. You know, and you realize that guy started out, by his own admission, he was 14. Dave Chappelle started when he was 14. Now he's a comedy. I don't even know how old he is now. What is he, 50? But he's worked his way up. He spent a life in comedy. He deserves being rich because he worked his ass off. No one gave it to him. So I think, you know, when you're watching your team, when you're watching an actor, you're watching a film, you want the film, you want to see people, you want to see the movies that you love be recognized because it shows that you yourself have good taste. When you win an Oscar pool, it means you knew your shit. You know about the movies, you follow the business, And I think that's all it means. Again, it's an easily quantifiable way for us human beings to organize ourselves around certain things. And I think it's wonderful. I think it doesn't matter how, like, I don't get cynical about people who are rich. I mean, sure, there's a lot of inherited wealth in the world, but a lot of people like that we know that are filthy rich started, I keep going back to when I was I don't know when I saw this, but I saw this like PBS documentary, and it wasn't about Gen Z, maybe it was about millennials. I think it was probably about millennials. Early millennials. And there was a problem. They were doing a profile of an ad agency, I think in Hollywood, that had brought in all of these young people right out of college, like 22, 23, 24, to work at this ad agency. And none of them understood how much work was involved. So working, 10 or 12-hour days, working on the weekends, all this. And people were like asking for vacations after like 3 months because they just didn't understand. They didn't understand how much work is actually involved, in the workplace. So they had to hire somebody and bring somebody in to be a liaison between the kids that were working, so they understood what it was like to work all the time without a lot of praise. Because now you're getting paid, no one has to tell you how good you are. And this is not to criticize millennials, but it was just something that I watched. And it was sort of it was interesting, but it made me think back. And the guy said on the show that one of the the girls that he was dealing with admired Sean Combs, and this is just, it struck me like Puff Daddy, P Diddy, Sean Combs, and I want to be like Sean Combs. I want to host fabulous parties and be rich like him. And the funny thing is that Sean Combs started producing records when he was 14 too. Like Dave Chappelle and Sean Combs both started working when they were kids, and started honing their craft. It's not like Dre walked along and anointed Sean Combs or something and said, now you're a movie producer, now you're a music producer, now you're going to be a rap impresario and start a clothing label and be an entrepreneur. He started when he was a kid. He worked his way up. He deserved to be rich. But, these people in this ad agency were expected to be that rich as well, and they wanted to take vacations after like 3 months. And that's not the way the world works. All the people that I know that are rich in the film business all busted their ass. They all busted their ass. Nobody handed them money. And so, that's the way I see it. Average moviegoer sends in a tip and says, I couldn't care less about who or what wins an award. I see films I like. I like what I like, and no critic or award can change my personal taste. Why do people care about these awards? What are the judges looking for? Is there a point system? I'm puzzled. Well, again, I mean, look, human beings like it when if you find somebody that likes the same things that you do. I mean, this whole show, I find myself delighted if I say to somebody, you should watch this movie, or I recommend something. I've gotten a couple of letters about my favorite anime series, Legends of the Galactic Heroes. I've said to people, I'm like, not only is this one of the great animes ever made, but it's one of the great science fiction series ever made. And most people don't pay any attention because they don't like anime. So I'm like, okay. But when people do and they watch it and they're like, oh my God, Rob, this is fucking incredible. I had no idea. And then I'm like, yep. And then I feel vindicated. I have to, because that means my taste is good. I mean, I know it is good, but because I know, I just know it is. But if I like something, I'm free to admit, and I'll tell you, if I like something that is demonstrably not good, but I'll like it anyway, I know that as well. But when somebody tells me they like something I've recommended, then I'm like, that's dope. I love that you do that. And I think that's what award shows are doing. It's a way for people to quantify and then put down what they like. And like, look, you have, let's say you get 1,000 actors together to all vote for Best Picture or Best Actor, Best Actress. Actors are voting on these awards. So the actors themselves, and by the way, if you've ever hung out with actors, you get this in Hollywood, in your 20s and 30s especially. All you do is listen to them saying, I was up for that role, and I could have been better in that role. You would not believe how much I've heard that. But that's why people do it. They and the people that vote on the Academy Awards, you have people, it really is a jury of their peers voting. So it means something to people because presumably they know about the categories. So when and everybody, all the membership gets to vote on Best Picture. So you're being voted on when the Academy gives you an award. You're being voted on by your peers in the different categories. So it does have meaning because the people who are voting understand, like sound mixers or editors or cinematographers. They're all voting for what they see. So the awards mean something because they're coming from presumably people that are just as talented as you are. So I think that's pretty cool. Stub McShave says, it was nice to talk to you and Dave on Midnight Metal. It was cringy to watch myself. I was probably pretty nervous because I recognized a couple of nervous tics that I have. Oh, Stubble, you were great. For those of people who don't know, I've been doing a show on the weekends. It was going to be pretty random, but I think I'm going to do it every Saturday night, at least now, called Midnight Metal. We're just calling it that, and the joke is that, yeah, man, fucking metal, which really was derived out of how I was talking about Zack Snyder's The Snyder Cut when I was saying just how metal it all was. And I've been randomly calling people. Like, we could do it on this show. Want to see what that's like? Yeah, I think it's been kind of fun to randomly allow somebody. I wasn't planning on doing it today, but there's 416 people watching this show right now. I am going to now, I'm not going to say exactly when. If anybody wants to come be a live guest on this show right now, you got to have a decent camera and you've got to have a decent mic. That's all I would ask. If you have a decent camera and mic, I am going to drop a random, sometime in the next, 10, 20 minutes, I'm going to drop a link in, and it's first come, first serve. And whoever shows up first, I'm going to put in the live chat. And if you aren't in the live chat, but it shows you've linked up, that means you're still there, and I can put you on too. So wait in line. And it's weird. It's dangerous because I don't know who's going to show up. Maybe somebody's going to show up and actually, you can't show up and be like naked and give us all a dick pic because I can see you before that happens, unless you're going to try and do that, in which case I have a little bit of a delay and I could zap you too. But why would you do that? You can if you want. If you do, make sure it's really impressive, whatever it is you want to show us. So I'm going to do that because why not? So Stubble did it all the way from Sweden, but I thought you were great, man. Come on anytime. Ash Challen's here. Ash says, everyone thinks they're celebs now via social media posts and the intoxicating feeling of importance that likes and follows can give. Totally agree with that. Movies and movie stars don't have that mystique anymore. Streaming has ruined the mythic nature of the theatrical experience. You know what, Ash? You're not wrong. I think that's all part of it. And you know what's happened? Now that everybody is the star of their own reality show, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on TikTok, wherever it is, you're now at the center of your own universe, so movie stars are no longer have the sway anymore. You know, like I was telling Elizabeth the other day, I'm like, oh my God, Jeffree Star got in a horrible accident. I mean, he flipped his Rolls Royce. I'm like, I hope it's not his brand new, custom made pink Rolls Royce. And Sophie's looking at me like I'm crazy, and Elizabeth's looking at me. She's like, why do you even know about Jeffree Star? Why do you know he was in a car accident? Why do you know that he even has a bespoke pink Rolls Royce? How do you know any of this happened? I'm like, you can't work in the YouTube space and not be aware of certain influencers. I mean, Jeffree Star made $18 million on YouTube in 2018. How can you not want to be like, well, how do you do that? You got to know these people. So anyway, but you're right, Ash. I think social media and all that, and I'll tell you what's also something to take into consideration. Movies and TV shows and movies were the only game in town. Over the last, what's YouTube's been online since 2007, 2006. YouTube has become just as important, or TikTok, online, Twitch, whatever your jam is, Clubhouse, whatever your jam is, these things have become just as important as any other form of entertainment. And I think that's like, even I never watch network shows anymore, except Manifest, and I'll watch Debris. That's it. The rest of the stuff, I don't even care. I'm watching YouTube clips. I'm zipping through clips. That's what I think is cool. Andrew Christie says, having said that, I'm very excited about the opening of the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures. I can't wait. Maybe a flicker of hope in restoring the myth, or maybe just a tribute to a bygone era. I don't think it's a bygone era. I think it's just changing. I think, look, like everything else, the problem is entertainment. There's a lot more things. Like, look, I put on a YouTube show today, right? I'm talking for 2 hours just into a camera. Now, I've explained this to a lot of people, and a lot of people in the entertainment business. There's still friends of mine that look down on me like, why are you on YouTube, Rob? Why are you talking to people? And I'm like, well, look, I could spend 5 fucking years making a movie. I can bang my head against the wall, as I do every day. I talk to somebody some days, or some days I talk to a lot of people trying to get another project off the ground. I already know that I can make it. You know, as an editor, I worked on Dota, Dragon's Blood. It's there. I got that job. Came out, turned out well. Tango Shalom, picking up awards, a lot of buzz on the festival circuit for what it is. You know, I've never had a chance to make a $100 million movie, but I'm always trying to get movies off the ground. I was having a conversation just before the show about doing a $2 million science fiction project. I'm looking for the $2 million. I know that based on the people that I'd be working with and the talent I have involved, that $2 million science fiction film would do well on the festival circuit, and we'd probably sell it to a streamer and putting it out. But you got to find the $2 million first. But the funny thing is if I had that $2 million, I would start pre-production tomorrow. If I had the money because I know how to do it. I can produce an entire film. Now, if I tell people, well, Rob, that seems very arrogant. Well, I know how to do it. But here's the thing. That $2 million that I would spend making this movie, we would probably finish that movie. If I had my druthers, let's give her, if I had to get the money paid back, let's say we had to do a Terminator 2 style and I had to make an independent science fiction sci-fi epic for $2 million in 9 months. We could do that. We could get it done. 9 months, and that movie's going to be between 90 minutes and 2 hours long. I can do 300 episodes of this show. Now, admittedly, my audience for this show is a lot smaller. But it's becoming, I love making movies. I love the process of making movies. I love being on set. I love dealing with all the department heads. I love dealing with all the people. I was so fortunate that I could finish all of Tango Shalom. And I was the visual effects supervisor. I was the post-production supervisor, the editor itself. I mean, I was doing so much, and I oversaw everything on post. Everything. I did everything. And I mean, I worked with other people, like talented effects people. Tobias Richter, who I'd worked on Axonar, he did a digital matte painting and an effect. My good friend Darren Doctorman, he did a lot of effects. I just hired them. Like, I knew they could do it. Guys, can you do this? Ben Alpe designed our very cool opening credit shot, and he had his own short film on the festival circuit. I could go do all this, but it's hard because then you have to ask yourself, am I going to spend 9 months creating 2 hours of entertainment now? And why? Because people are now splitting. It's not just TV and movies. The magic is gone because people can watch a 2-hour YouTube show and be just as entertained. Why spend $200 million and spend 2 years making a movie for the same 2-hour period of time? Well, I know because I love movies. They're great. But in terms of people's time, it's hard. Even me, it's like, well, people have said to me, well, Rob, you're getting older. Maybe you should hang up your desire to make movies and just concentrate on YouTube. And I'm like, I mean, I could, but the only reason I have the balls to even get on YouTube and talk like I do, talking shit or talking about the industry, is because I'm actually working in the industry. And I feel if I didn't have some tenuous connection to the industry in some way, shape, or form, I couldn't speak to you the way I do. I would feel like a fraud. So, but then again, you have to come to grips with the fact that our movies is important to people. And you guys are right. Andrew, I don't know. Bobby Hatch-Kowal. It seems Disney is finally settling with Alan Dean Foster, who wrote novelizations of Star Wars and Alien. He and other writers have been due residuals from Disney since 2012. And let me put that in. And they should, by the way. I mean, it's what they're due. And contractually they were due, and Disney's not paying. Disney flat out said, nope. No, Disney, you bought those contracts too. You can't just buy Fox and not live up to those contracts. It's part of what you bought. Remember, you don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. These people negotiated this, and you people have to make do. So I put that in the live chat. Oh, wait. I did put Inside the Magic in the live chat. That was not the live chat to what I wanted to do. Our good friend Throg. Throg hasn't been around in a while. Throg, I got to tell you, without Throg, my ass, we would, I don't know, in the middle of the great toilet paper crisis here, Throg kept us in. I don't know how he did it. He found us toilet paper where he worked. I don't know what he did, but let me tell you, he shipped us toilet paper cross country, and we only recently ran out of it. And now you can get toilet paper again, so thank you, Throg. Throg has been, he's been away for a while. It's good to have him back. Throg will not submit, sends in a tip and says, Chadwick can be honored by being given an honorary Oscar at a later date just because he died and was a seemingly great human being doesn't mean he deserves a Best Actor Oscar win. This is the type of entitlement that people hate about award shows. I think, did you say something else? O2? Look, I agree. I think this weird thing, like the fact that Chad Boseman didn't win for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean like he wasn't given. I mean, you've got Stephen Yen gave a great performance. Gary Oldman was incredible in Mank. I mean, you had a Stephen Yen in Minari and Anthony Hopkins. You had an incredible category there. You can't sit there and go, don't tell me that Anthony Hopkins didn't deliver a performance that was not Oscar-worthy, because he did. And the idea of Chad Boseman getting an honorary award, the Academy Awards are not about honoring people that died too soon. There's a lot of people that died too soon. And I love Chad Boseman, and his performance was incredible. But that's not why you give people an Academy Award. And the fact that Anthony Hopkins won at 83, remember, he had to suffer through, he's been nominated 6 times, he's won twice. He hadn't won in 29 years. And it was richly deserved. I mean, he so didn't think he was going to win that he didn't even show up to the ceremony. And also, they thought Chad Boseman was going to win. They put his last. They wanted to end on a high note. So I agree with you, Throg. Oh, Nick Parrish says, "What's up, Rob? So I know last week I gave a light recommendation for you to watch Eon, Griffin, procedural crime drama." Harrow. But now, after binging almost 3 seasons of it, I'm pounding the table on that recommendation. You will enjoy this, Rob. Harrow. Well, Harrow I will watch. I will tell Elizabeth we have to watch Harrow. We need shows to watch all the time because we binge them and then we're done. Stubble says, I'd love to hear Willow's review of Discovery. However, that may be a form of torture, and I don't think she'll like that. On the other hand, knowing Willow, you never know. You know what, dude? I hope Willow Yang reviews Discovery. I hope so, because I'm counting on her to perhaps see something I don't, and maybe me feel better about it. Okay, guess what? Are you guys ready? First come, first serve. Ba-bam, right there. There is a link if you want to come on this show. Hit that link. We'll see if anybody does. We'll see. Alexander Wilson says, from Deadline, Mortal Kombat had the most viewed premiere ever on HBO Max from Samba TV statistics. It bested Godzilla v. Kong's previous mark. What are your thoughts? Also, I didn't like the movie. The editing was terrible. I've heard that. I haven't watched it yet. I will watch it, but I'll check it out. But look, a lot of people, a lot of gamers out there, the world video games, it does not surprise me. Mortal Kombat is an IP that people love. People love Mortal Kombat. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. So why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't it do those numbers? I would have expected nothing less. Nothing less. So yeah, John Campea has said the editing was terrible too. And, as an editor myself, I'm keenly aware of editing, so I hope I don't think it's that bad. I hate bad editing in movies. I always go like, why? Andrew Christie says, Rob, I think you misunderstood my Me Too example. I meant that was a bit of a watershed moment in tarnishing the mythic aura of the magic of Hollywood and the cynicism that followed, and now the industry needs to rebuild from there. Ooh, okay. Yeah, you know what? You're right. I mean, yeah, but I think there's not just a cynicism about Hollywood. I think there's a cynicism about everything, and I think that's probably also feeding into certain things. But yeah, I think there's cynicism everywhere, and I don't know what to do about that. But I've got Tom Jr. Jackson is here. Tom Jr. Jackson. Let me see. Tom, can you hear me, Tom? Uh-oh. Something just knocked. Oh, no. That looked bad. Are you... Tom Jr. Jackson might have had some kind of an accident. Well, we shall see. I'm gonna put you in. You want to come in? I can hear you. Do you want to come into the show still? Or all right. I'm gonna get Tom Jr. Jackson. And I'm gonna put Tom Jr. Jackson in. I can hear you. But you got a wire in front of your screen there, buddy. I can hear you. Yes, I can. And I'm going to put you into the stream. All right. You ready? Well, hang on. Tom Jr. Jackson, why don't you join Robservations? Good to see you again, Tom. How are you?
Yeah.
How are you? Can you hear me?
How's it going, buddy?
It's going. Now, why don't you tell the viewers at home, where are you? Is there?
Yeah.
Where are you? Where are you located? Oh, you know what? You can't hear me. I'll tell you why you can't. Now you can hear me. Now you should be able to hear me.
Yes,
okay,
I can
now
hear
you can.
you.
That was my fault. You couldn't hear me. So, Tom,
Yeah.
tell us, Imagination Connoisseurs, where you at? Where are you located?
I am in Pawcatuck, Connecticut.
Pawcatuck, Connecticut. Is that a indigenous people's name? Is that a tribe?
Actually, Pawcatuck, Connecticut it's right around the corner from Rhode Island, and about 10 minutes from me in Watch Hill, Rhode Island, where the beaches are, is Taylor Swift's house.
Do you ever go there and like camp out, get all Swiftish?
Well, actually, I actually did. I was with some friends, and we were up all night, and we were fishing at the back of her house, down at the bottom of the beach, and right above there is like this huge wall of rocks, and then there's a security camera and a fence. But yeah, we stayed up all night just like fishing and stuff.
Did you catch anything?
I did it. My friend was catching skeet, which looks like the like a stingray almost.
Yep.
Actually, the skeet is what they use for when you have your artificial crab.
Right. That's yes. Okay. Have you been a fisherman all your life?
No. I just went out with some friends that night, and we were just hanging out. They're like, "Let's go down to the beach." I'm like, "Sure, why not?" Didn't realize we were going to go behind Taylor Swift's house, but why not?
Well, hey, why not? So let me ask you this: since we have you here, when did you know, or when did you become an imagination connoisseur?
I became an imagination connoisseur. I would have to say, when I was a child, my parents took me to the movies. They took me to see, they bring it all back to Anthony Hopkins' Magic.
Wow. And how old were you?
Let's see. I had to been about maybe 3, something like that. And here's the reason why, is that we went to the drive-in. They saw that I liked the Muppets, and they said, "Oh, look, there's a puppet in that movie." Took me to see it. I had no idea what it was about. So now whenever I see that movie on TV, I'll watch it. You know?
Didn't they know it was R-rated?
I think they knew it was R-rated. I just didn't think they knew what it was about.
Did it traumatize you?
No.
Oh.
If it's on TV, I'll watch it anytime. I mean, it's a great movie with Anne Margaret, Burgess Meredith. It's a great movie. And William Goldman wrote that and the book.
I know he did. Yep. Another great score. Okay, I got a question for you. Would you consider yourself, how old are you? Can I ask you that?
I am 45.
45.
My birthday's Christmas Eve.
Oh, well, that sucks, because then do you get double presents? Okay, as long as you get double presents, that's good.
Right.
All right. So you're not a millennial. You're not a
I'm
millennial.
not.
Well, here, Alexander Wilson sends in a tip, and he says, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in 2017, millennials averaged more work hours per day than non-millennials. Millennials are worse financially than Gen X. The net worth of Americans in the 18 to 35 bracket has dropped 34% since 1996. What do you think about that? So millennials are working hard but making less.
Well, it all depends on, well, like a lot, I know they want to up the minimum wage, but I think it's more or less like supply and demand, and it's a lot of people. Some people want to work, some people don't want to work. Some people want to pay people more, other people don't want to pay people more. It's all crazy out there, you
No,
know?
I think so too. And I think there's a lot of jobs. Like, I'll tell you something. I think a lot of jobs have been devalued. I know in my own field in post-production, some people get paid a lot if you're working on studio movies, but if you're working on indie cinema and all that, my rates have to be competitive have cratered,
Right.
which sucks.
I just wanted to let you. I wanted to say that I have a group of friends who are in the PGS who will get together. Like yesterday, we got together and we were watching Let's Get Physical Media. So it was myself and Catherine, who was on the show Midnight Metal the other night.
She has a good collection of physical media.
She does, and sometimes Philip Alvarez, Black Philip, will come into our Zoom chat. And
he was also on Midnight Metal twice.
Yeah, he was really good. Yeah. So we'll all sit there and we'll watch it, and then we're like, well, I got this. Well, I got this. And we just join in and we comment on what you guys are doing. We'll do Midnight Metal together and we'll hang out, and we just have a blast watching you.
Oh, well,
we have a good time.
I appreciate that. I mean, if nothing else, I think I was talking with Mike Bodden about this. The one different thing about this channel that I think is different than other YouTube channels is engagement with the audience. That's what I like. I mean, I like talking to you. It's a thrill for me to talk to you guys, and I think I'm doing more of that. People like that, and we're building a sense of community. And the only way to do that is to get to know each other. And then, of course, if you're a member of the channel, we're doing, as you know, a Zoom call on Saturday. The last Zoom call lasted 6 hours.
Rob, that was the best. And I like to go, you know what? I'm calling it. I'm having too much fun. Let's keep going. And it was the best because we all had a great time. And, I say if you're having fun, keep going. If it doesn't seem like fun, you got to end it. You got to end the party.
Right. But normally, I mean, I always usually have things to do. But then I was like, I was kind of day drinking. I'm having a good time. Let's keep it going.
I wanted to share something with you. So today I got a book in the mail, and it's this Eric Idle book called The Road to Mars.
Nice. I know that book.
And so I get the book, I open it up, and it's autographed.
Wow.
And I got this from like one of those websites called, I think it's Thrift Books, where you can get books for a really good price.
Wow.
And I just open it up and it's like autographed. I'm like, okay, that's cool, right? And then the second book I got was The Visual History of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I opened it up and it's autographed to 2 people from the author.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, maybe Thrift Books specializes in getting autographed copies. That's really cool.
Maybe it does, but I'll tell you this is that I'm like, oh, good gracious, two signed books. I should go out and get some lottery tickets. Maybe today's my day.
Well, yes. I mean, if you're gonna, perhaps the universe, the tumblers are clicking into place to make it something good's going to happen. Maybe I should go pitch a project or something. Of course, I didn't get autographed.
Yeah, I mean the only other autographed book I have is the Val Kilmer autobiography.
Did
and
you go meet him?
I got that from a Walmart. No, I got it from a Walmart. It says this is a signed edition.
Wow. Well, that's cool.
I said, oh, I'm getting that. I want that. So, yeah.
So let me ask you this. Have you seen Mortal Kombat?
I have not watched it yet.
Are you gonna?
I think I might, but I've been getting like mixed reviews of it here and there.
Yeah.
But I'll give it a shot. I mean, if it's going to be fun, it'll be fun.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't look down on movies. I don't have expectations going into it. I just go to enjoy it. And if I don't enjoy it, I don't enjoy it,
Right. Sure.
I think putting an expectation on a movie is not a good thing, because then you get this whole idea in your head of how it's going to be and what might happen. And then when that doesn't happen.
Uh-oh. You froze. Tom Jr. Jackson froze. That happens sometimes. All right, Tom, I want to thank you for being here. I'm going to switch you out, if that's okay with you. I'm going to switch you off, and I will see you again. That was Tom Jr. Jackson, an Imagination Connoisseur par excellence. You know what? I'm going to add somebody else, because why not? Let's see. Preston, you're all over the place. You look like you're in a. I'm looking at Preston. Doesn't look good there, buddy. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, there was no. I don't know why. Tom. That's well, maybe that's me. Maybe it's me. Anyway, I've got Claudius. Claudius send in our man Claudius, one half of the official first couple of the Burnettwork. Claudius says, oh man, these, me and the French. Comment allez-vous, Monsieur Robert? Have you seen Soleil Moon Fry of Punky Brewster fame, Kid 90? Her documentary featuring her home movies from the 90s. It's an intimate time capsule with Stephen Dorff, Mark Gosselaar, and Brian Austin Green. I have not seen that, but man, I would watch that. Robert, you were there in the early 90s. Did you ever attend one of these parties? No. Did you ever run into Rob Lowe or Robert Downey Jr.? Give us a good story. I did not. The early 90s, I was eking out. I was strictly in production. I didn't know any real stars. I did throw a party at my friend Dan Schweiger's house that like Vince Vaughn and Jon Favreau and stuff came to. It was a pretty big party. But it wasn't until later that I got to hobnob with bigger people, but not in the early 90s. I mean, I was in college, and then I was working, my early 20s. I didn't know, it was all low budget genre fare. So I didn't really go out. I mean, I went out a lot, but I didn't hobnob with any celebs. So I'm sorry to disappoint all of you. I apologize. All this old stuff about people becoming members, but I apologize. But anyway, I'm going to bring an end to this show. Hang on, maybe. Nope, no one's there. I'm going to bring an end to this show. I want to thank everybody. Robservations episode number 676 is coming to a close. I want to thank everybody who supports the channel via donations through tips or super chats. Thank you so much. And I also want to thank all of our members. You can join the channel for $1 a month. And this Saturday, we're going to have another one of our epic Zoom calls. I canceled Robservations last week, and we just skated through. We had a 6.5-hour Zoom call with everybody. It was great. So much fun. And you can participate by becoming a member of the channel. So I want to thank you all for doing that. I want to thank my moderating staff for being a great, great, great moderating staff. I want to say thank you to Mike Bodden. Louise X. Sparrow is here. Bunyan Snipe is here. Darren J. Seeley is here. Greg Smith was here one day. I didn't thank him. I don't know if he's here today or not, but I want to thank all of you for doing what you do. Bunyan Snipe all the way from the UK. Same with Louise X. Sparrow. The UK connection is strong on this channel. But I want to thank all of you for being a part of it. And on that note, I want to say, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to you, have a better day. I'll be back on the John Campea Show and back here tomorrow.